Hey friends, welcome back to the shop, and today we're going to be building some toys. You say, Ron, that doesn't much look like a toy. But check that out. They turned out awesome. So, been building a few dominoes for sale. Had a couple of orders come in for them. And these are made out of hard maple and walnut, and of course it's a walnut box. But just like many things that I do, when I'm trying to learn to do something, I go on where? YouTube. And there's very few videos about how to make dominoes. Stumpy Nubs had a great one. But I decided to go ahead and post this one. So if you guys want to make some really cool dominoes, that this video may help you step by step how to do that. So anyways, follow along and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to be making the domino bodies out of this hard maple. Now the dominoes themselves are going to be 3/8 of an inch thick, and this is just over 1 inch thick, so I'm going to be able to get two sets, one out of this half and one out of this half. The very first thing I'm going to cut is going to be 1 inch wide strips, which is the width of the domino. They're 2 inches long, 1 inch wide. So I got my basically 1 inch square blanks. One side's a little wider than the other. So I measured those and marked those as the top because I want to take the blade width out of it, the kerf of the saw blade, come out of the middle. Using the feather board to make sure that it's held tight against the fence as I push them through. So I'll come out with two pieces that are going to be essentially 1 inch wide and 1/2 inch thick. Next up, I'm going to run each one of these through the planer to get it down to that 3/8 of an inch thickness. They've got little bows in them and stuff, just like hardwood is when you cut it. But I don't care because I'm going to be cutting those down into 2 inch long strips, so that's not going to matter. Just so long as they're all uniform thickness. Okay, so I got my table saw sled installed. I got a stop block set at 2 inches. I'm going to take all of these pieces, set them in there, and because I don't want my fingers that close to the blade, I have a good relationship with my fingers, I'm going to use this handy pencil to make sure that I'm holding it down in place as I slide it through. And just keep repeating it until I just have a whole bunch of pieces cut 2 inches long. I've got about 100 of these little dominoes cut out, and I am making more than one set at a time. I'm not making a double 47 set of, I don't even want to think about the math on that. It takes 28 dominoes to make a set of double 6. So next up, I moved my stop block over to 1 inch of the center of the blade. So I'm going to reduce the depth on the saw blade down to about 3/32 of an inch, just under 1/8 of an inch. And I want to cut the divider groove that separates the sides. I'll go through every one of them. I'll hold it down with a pencil just to keep my hands away from the blade. And then I'll take them over and sand them down a little bit, and we'll put the dots. All right, so I got all my dividers cut. I don't know if you could see that, how it makes a little line in the middle. So next up, I got these sheets of Domino Templates that I printed off free off the internet. If you want to make some, just search free Domino Templates PDF. Self-explanatory. But I'm going to take my scissors, I'm going to cut each of these out. I'm not going to cut it exactly on the line, just rough cut it. And then take some of this spray adhesive. I've got the Loctite one, but any one of the spray adhesives will work. Using the scrap piece of 1/4 inch plywood, which I don't get it all over my table, I'll spray these and I'll stick each one of them in one of these templates. That way I'll know the pattern to take it over to the drill press to drill out the holes in order to glue in the pips. So got a lot of work here to cut all these out and get them glued on. So I've got two sets in here that are ready to drill the pips in. I'm using a 3/16 inch pilot point bit. A brad point bit would be better, but I don't have one of those, so pilot tip will have to work. And that's just so that as I start drilling, it stays right where I want it. It doesn't kind of move around a little bit. I got the depth stop set to about 3/16 of an inch. I don't want to drill all the way through it, just enough to be able to glue that walnut pip in there. And as soon as I get done with all these, I'll peel the paper off, and then I'll go ahead and start putting the pips in it. All right, to make my pips, I've cut little strips of walnut. They're just over 3/16 square. I took them over to the belt sander, chucked them up in the drill, and just ran them over there sharpened to a point. Now this is a piece of 1-inch square tubing. I'd rather have angle iron, but I didn't have any. So what I did was I drilled a 3/16 hole on this side, and there's a 3/8 hole on this side. I'll put these in the drill, and I'll drive them in there starting with the pointy side, and the burr on this hole right here will cut that down into a 3/16 dowel, which is the exact size that I need for my pips. So I'm gonna get all these turned down into dowels. So I turned a few of these dowels down. Some of them broke off. I had to struggle through that a little bit. I think it's because I need to drill a new hole with sharp, fresh burrs on it before I try to do some more. But anyways, I've got enough to get going here. So this end is still square. We'll cut it off. Cut it off, and then we'll take our domino, make sure that all the sawdust is out of the, still got the paper on it. I decided this time I'm gonna leave the paper on because when I sand these flat, I'll sand all that off too. Let's put a little dab of glue. Put a little dab of glue in that hole. Smear it around real good. Press the dowel in there. Then I'll take a paper towel, clean off the squeeze out a little bit on each one of them, and then I will take my flush trim saw here and I'll cut that off really close to the domino, and then I'll put some glue in there and I'll do all the rest of them. I'll cut each one after I do it. I tried cutting a bunch of little bitty pieces before and sticking them in there, and that was really a headache. So this works much better. Just take the one long piece, glue it in there, cut it off, and then just rinse and repeat. So I've got a bunch of these to put down, put the pips in, and then we'll sand them down. Got all my pips in. They sure don't look like much. My favorite one is this one. This is the one that's hardest to screw up, the double blank. But I'm fixing to make them look pretty. So I got 120 grit sandpaper on my belt sander. Take each one of them, sand off all this extra glue and the length of the pips and all the paper and everything, and go around them, make sure that we get all the marks off of them. And then they'll turn out real pretty. I still have some hand sanding. I like to hand sand the edges to make them nice and smooth and feel like a regular store-bought porcelain domino. But get all these sanded up and we'll back to the table. So I hand sanded all the edges with 120 grit sandpaper just to take the sharp edge off. And I could ship them out like this with just a raw wood grain or wood color of it. But I want to add a layer of protection and bring that grain out and make it look beautiful. So I'm going to use natural color Danish oil to work down in those pores and bring out that grain of that walnut and that maple. I'm just going to use an old t-shirt to wipe that in real good, let it dry, and then we'll work on the box because every set of dominoes needs a special box to keep them in. Okay, dominoes are finished. They turned out great. And while I'm waiting for the Danish oil to dry on them, I'm going to go ahead and build some boxes out of this piece of walnut that my buddy Jared gave me. I'm gonna resaw it down to some thinner strips. I'm gonna make a shallow box with a sliding lid that opens and closes. May put some maple in there just for some splash of color, but I'm gonna get moving on that while these dry, so follow along. So I got my pieces of walnut face jointed on one side and then planed down to parallel on the other side. That's a figment of your imagination. You're not really seeing that. Santa Claus came early and I have not had the time to tune up my new table saw yet. So I'm not using it quite yet. There's be a video coming out about how I set it up and tune it up. Got to make some adjustments to my table to make it match. But I'm super excited. But in the meantime, to give these a parallel edge, I'm going to double-side tape them to this square board here, slide them along my fence, cut the edge off flush, and then I can turn them up on their edges, and I can rip them off, rip them down to the widths that I want them, which is going to be a little more than 1/4 of an inch. Then I can plane them down to the 1/4 inch that I want for the boxes. So close your eyes, can't see that, but I'm super excited. Got all my side pieces to my boxes cut. They're 1/4 inches thick. They're 1 3/4 inches wide. I've got my 1/4 inch dado in here, set at 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I'm going to groove a dado on both sides. Cut one, then flip it over, cut the other. The bottom one will be so that the bottom can free float in there and expand with temperature and humidity, and the top so that the top can slide open in order to get the dominoes out. So I'm going to cut all these dados in there. Then we'll take the fence off, we'll take that blade out, put a regular blade in there, put the miter sled on here and cut 45s because I want to do mitered corners on these because they'll look real pretty. But for now, I'm going to cut dados in all these and then move on. Got my blade set to 45 degrees. I got my miter sled on here. I'm going to cut all of my long sides with a 45-degree miter on each end. Then I'll shorten my stop block down to whatever the width is. I think it's like 4 1/4, somewhere around there. And I'll cut all my end pieces. I'll glue all those together, put the top in, and then we'll cut the top out so that it makes a little slide thing. But I'll show you guys that. pieces are ready for assembly except for the fronts. And the fronts, because I want the top to slide out, I've got to go to the table saw. I've got to cut just below this top dado, and I'm going to glue the top part in like this, and it'll be cut right here so the top will slide out, but whenever it goes together it looks like it's one solid piece, kind of a hidden top other than you know, the saw kerf right here. But I'm going to take this to the table saw, cut them off, I'll glue the box up. So my walnut domino boxes turned out really nice. And the top slides open like this. And the corners on the top, if you can see that, the corners on the top are mitered so that whenever the lid slides closed, it matches right up to the rest of the box and matches this end. And then it has just, this is the width of the saw blade where I cut it so that it could open. And I think that turned out just fine too. So a little bit more sanding, put the natural Danish oil on there to finish it up, and then we'll load them up with dominoes and load them in a box and mail them off to their, the customers. And here you are, finished product. Nice little lid that slides out. Got 28 dominoes in there. The pips turned out pretty great. Dominoes themselves turned out very nice too. So, anybody up for a game? Because this is going to be a lot of fun for someone. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys.